According to a recent New York Times Siena College poll, the economy remains the most important issue for voters in the upcoming presidential election. And 23 Nobel Prize-winning economists are siding with Harris. We believe that overall, Harris's economic agenda will improve our nation's health, investment, sustainability, resilience, employment opportunities and fairness, and be vastly superior to the counterproductive economic agenda of Donald Trump. One of those Nobel laureates is Joseph Stiglitz, and Professor Stiglitz joins us now for more. Professor, welcome back to the programme. Before we got into this, I wanted to go back to something you said about 6 years ago about the Trump administration at the time. You said no country could have a more unqualified economic team than Trump's, and a majority of Americans are not behind the trade war. Public support will wane even further as Americans realise that they lose doubly from this war. And as you know, sir, Harris and Biden did not remove many of those tariffs. They stuck with them. And in a recent Reuters poll, some 56% of registered voters said they were more likely to support a candidate backing a new 10% tariff. So, Professor, thanks for bearing with me. The first question, how much daylight is there between what you think this country needs and what this country seemingly wants?
Well, there's a very, very big difference between Harris and Trump on these tariffs. Trump has talked about 100% tariffs and tariffs even on our allies, whereas Harris has talked about very moderate tariffs on China. And the reason for those moderate tariffs is, like it or not, we are in a new Cold War. And we have to de-risk. We have to reduce our dependence on China. And that 10% tariff is a signal to our business community of where we're going. The 100% tariff that Trump proposes will be extraordinarily disruptive, lead to significant inflation, and in the end, result in a tax, in an inflation that particularly hurts those in the middle and the bottom because it's a tax on the goods that they buy.
Professor, we've heard from Biden administration officials, though, like the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, talking about the fact that China is unfair on the global market, that they dump on other markets. When I talk to Trump advisors, they say they want reciprocity with free trade. So how do you get there?
Well, first, let me say that some of this unfair allegation is exaggerated. The fact is, the reason that China is ahead of us in EV is they recognized that there was a need to a green transition 20 years ago. They have an enormous scale. They have high competition among a number of firms. They have many more engineers than we do. They've been training a lot of them, some of them in the United States. So they have a, you might call it, natural competitive advantage, which they've taken advantage of. And then in addition to that, there's been some subsidies, but we've been giving enormous subsidies too. So I think as we think about where we are on this, we have to recognize that China today, not 50 years ago, but China today has some comparative advantages in certain aspects of manufacturing.
Professor, the U.S. has given subsidies when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act, when it comes to the CHIPS Act. Do you think the U.S. is subsidizing as much as China?
I suspect it's subsidizing even more. Those subsidies are now estimated by various experts at between $1 trillion and $1.5 trillion. And that doesn't include the $0.5 trillion that we're giving in chip subsidies. Chips, of course, are an important ingredient in cars. So the fact of the matter is that we are giving massive subsidies.
So is the U.S. in violation of WTO rules?
Oh, unambiguously, the U.S. is in violation. China is probably in violation. My own view is that if we want to have a rule of law, what we should do, if we believe China is in violation, go to the WTO, present our case, and let the judges decide. The problem is the U.S. has defenestrated the WTO by not allowing the judges to be appointed, and so there's not a quorum. But let me go back to the point that you raised. There is no comparison between the economic policies of Trump and those of Harris. Policies will lead to more inflation, larger deficits, lower economic growth, and enormous amount of disruption in the short run.
Professor, why do you think that didn't happen under Trump in the first term?
Well, the difference is that he now has unambiguous control of his party. Let me give you one example. You mentioned the letter from 23 Nobel Prize economists. There was a letter from more than 80 Nobel Prize scientists. Every year almost during Trump's administration, he proposed massive cuts in our science budget. Fortunately, a bipartisan agreement among Democrats and Republicans knew how devastating that would be for the U.S. Our strength lies in science and technology. You cut those budgets, it's going to really weaken the United States. And that's why more than 80 scientists, Nobel scientists, came out in support of Harris. Today, he has such control of of his party. If there were a Republican Congress, those cuts might be put into place.